Okay.
Chris, is that?
It's already. Good to go then. I've already.
What did you write in the fire truck?
I didn't. I kept trying to get in line, and it was just me and a bunch of kids, and I felt like I should let the kids do it. You should have done it. Well, then they told me I could just write in it later if I wanted, and I was like, there we go.
So all 5 boys were like, we're all gonna be
Good.
okay, you're going for fires. But last week they were all gonna be
Okay. Well, welcome all. Thank you so much for being here to the City of Philomath's October 9th City Council meeting. Just want to acknowledge and express our gratitude for Dr. Luhui Whitebear, who just was with us for the last hour and offered her personal reflections on Indigenous Peoples Day. I thought that was really great, and it was really nice to have a full audience here. Yeah, and I want to encourage everyone to go and Google that video, the Luhui Whitebear's Song of the Salmon. It is a really great video, and it's got some really nice poetry to it. So, but we're going to get started with a roll call.
Jessica Andrade. Present. Ruth Posey.
here.
Ryan Crocker. Here. Christopher McMorrin.
Here.
Teresa Nielsen.
Here.
Matt Lehman.
Here.
Chaz Jones.
I am here. And we are first going to get started with a resolution proclaiming 2023 Indigenous Peoples Day, which we passed last month. Councilor Andrade asked for the be
Sure.
as chair of the Inclusivity Committee.
And then to clarify, what is the number, the new number for the resolution?
23-19.
Oh, sorry, I thought I saw somewhere that was. City of Philomath Resolution 23-19, a resolution proclaiming the 2023 Indigenous Peoples Day. Whereas Oregon and the city of Philomath was founded upon land inhabited and stewarded by many bands of Indigenous people since time immemorial. And whereas Philomath was founded upon the lands and waters of the Marys River Band of the Kalapuya, the descendants of which include citizens of the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians and the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. And whereas the city wishes to recognize the city's past, ongoing, and future partnerships with the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians and the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon. And whereas our school district honors these partnerships and our shared history by incorporating tribal history and culture into our school's educational programs in partnership with the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. And whereas in recognition of our interests for continuing to grow partnerships between the city and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians and the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, both tribes gifted official tribal flags to the city of Philomath. And whereas Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations sponsored International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas. And whereas this city supports the principles contained in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples endorsed by the United States on December 16th, 2010. And whereas the Declaration recognizes the right of Indigenous peoples to the dignity and diversity of their cultures, traditions, histories, and aspirations, which shall be appropriately reflected in education and public information, and promotes efforts to combat prejudice, eliminate discrimination, and to promote tolerance, understanding, and good relations among Indigenous peoples and all other segments of society. And therefore be it resolved, the City Council and Mayor of the City of Philomath proclaim Monday, October 9th as Indigenous Peoples Day in the City of Philomath. Be it further resolved that the council encourages all residents to learn more about the history of the tribes and Indigenous peoples that traditionally cared for these lands.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We also have this month, the Inclusivity Committee brought to us a Disability Employment Awareness Month proclamation. Do you want to talk about that?
Just that we created a proclamation that was inspired by one that had been given on a federal level, and that's pretty much it.
Excellent. Were there proposed changes that we needed to address?
I did submit proposed changes.
Did anybody have any concerns or issues with those? Or can we accept them as proposed?
Can you remind us of what they are?
But I actually might left out. Perhaps Ruth, if you read those changes or.
The first one was a minor correction. I don't have the original one, just a moment.
One was, I can go over the first few, but I don't have the full paragraph. If you could read that, but the first one was in the sixth, whereas I believe workers should be plural.
Okay, I've got it now if you want me to do the other one. She also suggested the following clarification in the further it be resolved paragraph, to restate it to say further be it resolved. Then continue that sentence that all Philomath citizens and businesses are encouraged to continue the legacy of those who have fought for equal employment opportunities, integrated workplaces, and equal pay for equal work, period. And then a minor change to say, we encourage our citizens and businesses to join us in embracing the talents and skills disabled individuals bring to the workplace with the goal of achieving equal employment opportunities for all.
Okay.
I guess the only question I have on that is, I think each clause is supposed to be a single sentence. So if we're putting a period and creating a second sentence, we would probably need to create another clause. That's just a technical thing. But
You got stylistic
Counselor
choice.
Nielsen, can we replace the period with a
Okay.
semicolon?
Actually, they are not full sentences. You notice the comma and so.
right, that's what I'm
So-
saying, but none of them have period, like they're all
Right.
single,
Not.
right, yeah.
So in a conclusion, is that
as an amendment thing, as a resolution?
So that is actually, so the resolution is conclusion that you come to, and it is one thing. So what you would simply do is, you could amend that again by simply saying, repeating, further be it resolved.
That would be true.
And then the sentence is read out.
What about the idea of having a semicolon instead of a period?
Could semicolon it, but yeah. And can resolutions have more than further? Be it
Yeah, I think
resolved?
I have many.
Okay. So that would be my recommendation, is further be it. I haven't added anything.
Because we got a motion.
Oh, I move that we add a period of the restatement that is listed, that was read to us. But that segment began with the further be resolved as far as to initiate that next statement.
Do you think we get a motion for all the changes?
Oh, yeah, for all the changes and all the other changes listed that we've discussed this evening.
Second.
Question, I guess, just to clarify that, no, we still probably shouldn't put a period on that one. I'm sorry, I know we shouldn't get all, but then it should be a comma and.
Yes. it should
You
be.
do semicolon and
Okay.
then you do the new.
Yeah.
Further be it resolved.
Yes.
Were those suggested changes clear enough for the motion?
I think I got a pretty good idea.
Any further discussion, Council Andrade?
So since semicolon, does that mean all of the commas before and for all the other whereases should be semicolons as well?
They probably should be, but it's fine. I will.
Okay,
Since we were on the topic.
so any further discussion? All in favor, please use your hand, say aye.
Aye.
One is you didn't vote on the first resolution. We may come back to that in a minute.
We already did.
Oh, last month, and that's my short term.
Seconded by Councilor Ozzie. You had one more thing?
No, that was.
That was both of them?
You need to vote on this one.
Would we like to read this? Read this resolution? I can read it as it was presented to us without the actual edits, but
So we need to vote on it first.
no, we just did.
No, we voted on the amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor of passing the resolution as stated or as amended, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Would someone like to volunteer to read this? I can read most of it. Down to the, with therefore.
The actual resolution.
Right, I get most of it. I can do this. Okay, Disability Employment Awareness Month. Whereas we celebrate the essential contributions to our workplaces, economy, and nation made by disabled Americans. And whereas for far too long, employers could refuse to hire you if you were disabled, stores could turn you away if you used a wheelchair, there was no real way to take a bus or a train or work or to school. Whereas in 1945, President Truman established National Disability Employment Awareness Month and issued the first national call for disabled people to access all the opportunities and rewards of work. And whereas in 1990, Congress passed the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA, which helps to ensure workforce is more inclusive by banning disability discrimination, including in the workplace. And whereas the ADA has transformed lives and inspired over 180 other countries to pass similar laws and brought us closer to realizing the full promise of our nation. And whereas studies have found that Americans with disabilities are especially productive and motivated workers, but that they still have harder times getting jobs, promotions, and fair pay. And whereas we have an obligation to find and remove barriers to hiring and promotion and to recruit more recent graduates with disabilities. Now, therefore, the Philomath City Council does proclaim October 2023 as Disability Awareness Month in Philomath, Oregon. And further, be it resolved that all Philomath citizens and businesses are encouraged to continue the legacy for those who have fought for equal employment opportunities, integrated workplaces, and equal pay for equal work. And therefore, be it further resolved that the city of Philomath and all of its residents embrace the talents and skills that workers with disabilities have brought equal employment opportunity for all. Adopted and approved by the city council and signed by the mayor this 9th day of October 2020. Thank you. So next we have a public hearing on building permit fees and review. Yeah, I don't have my script.
Actually, this is not a land use hearing. It is just a public hearing on a piece of legislation.
Okay.
So, open the public hearing
Close.
and then wing it. Ask if anybody wants to
All right.
speak.
So, first of all, yeah, we're gonna open a public hearing on the building permit fees review. And do we have anyone that signed up to speak?
We do have building official Ron Dietrich here this evening.
Okay, great. Ron, come up and join us.
Evening, everyone. So I've now been building official for 20 years, and this will be the third time I've come before you. Hopefully, this is the simplest fee increase you've ever had. So a couple of years ago, actually, it's almost 3 years ago, came for you with the fee increase, and you directed, because it had been quite some time since we had a previous fee increase, and you directed me to be a little more proactive, keeping up with inflation. Wasn't expecting inflation to be at the rate it has been the last 3 years. So I'm here before you a little quicker than I had anticipated. So we're proposing to raise the electrical, mechanical, and plumbing fees. The structural fees are indexed to the inflation rate and are actually raised by the state every year, April 1st. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing fees are not. So occasionally we need to come before you and adjust for inflation. So this inflation rate goes from January of 21 to May of 23. And the CPI, Consumer Price Index, for that period was 12.6. And we're proposing a 12% increase in the electrical, plumbing, and mechanical fees. So fairly straightforward.
Excellent.
Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Just sort of in general, how do our fees compare to similar, like, are we about average? Just, you know, if I'm looking to build something, would these fees scare me away? Would they attract me? Would that matter?
Generally speaking, we fall right in the middle or average. The state actually, when we have a fee increase proposal, it first goes to the state and they do a comparable with our neighboring jurisdictions.
Okay.
So typically, as a side note, it's not the permit fees that are the difference between jurisdictions. It tends to be system development fees that are the largest impact for the building.
Thank you.
Ron, I wanted to add, and maybe I missed it, but did you note that the Benton County Commissioners are reviewing the exact same set of proposed fees?
Correct. On the 17th, we have a public hearing. The county.
And our intergovernmental agreement, Benton County, for our building permit program does expect us to have matching fees.
Counselor Causey?
Yes, there's a statement here. I'm not sure if if you're the appropriate person to ask this, but it indicates that these fees are considered a low income households, but I'm wondering if there's some provision for reducing or waiving these fees for low income.
So state law prohibits the building division subsidizing either low income or any other for that matter. That doesn't presume, or I guess the way to say this would be the city council could subsidize low income housing, but it can't come out of the building fees. Building fees are required by statute to be used for enforcing the building code.
Thank you.
Additional questions for? Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. With that, we're gonna go ahead and close the hearing. Close the public comment period. And yeah, have any questions of that?
Christopher has inspired me. In the sample table that was presented to us, it does say typical single family dwelling, although it doesn't say that that's for. Whereas in the text, it says it doesn't apply to structures only for mechanical or plumbing. And then the proposed fee change in that table is 12%. So I was just confused by that. I'm wondering what.
I could,
Yeah, I think that's a question for you.
okay with that.
Okay.
The directed fees have not come. Well, they're not tied to the 12%. So when you have a typical home, that's figured in, I believe, you can correct me, a or a single bath, mechanical. So those fees do affect a single family dwelling.
The impact of the difference between these two, the 4358 and 456421 is electrical, mechanical, and plumbing portions of those permit single family dwelling.
That makes more sense.
Great, clarifying question. Well, I would welcome a motion. I'll move that we approve resolution 23-25, adopting building, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, and structural permit inspection fees effective January 1st of 2022.
I'll second that.
Okay. So I made the motion, Councilor Lehman seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye. 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 Thank you so much for being here. Really,
Well, thank you all. Have a good evening.
For being
Lot of fact-
want to build a house. Well, 10 feet.
Chris?
Got it.
Part
It's part of it.
yeah. You want to do electrical plumbing?
Thank you for being here. Okay, excellent. So next we have public comment. And do you have anyone who would like to give public comment? Anyone signed up?
No, sir.
We'll go ahead and then move on to invite Ms. Peggy McGuire. To begin this and to the public presentation.
Good evening, and thanks for having me on your agenda tonight. Ms. Wire, thanks. I'm the Executive Director of Community Services Consortium. We are the state and federally designated community action agency that serves one Benton County. Okay, great.
And then we do have slides, a copy of the slideshow in your packet.
Well, that's okay. Okay, thanks so much. So I'm here tonight to talk to you about the Continuum of Care concept. And hoping to support an initiative that a lot of folks are involved in and interested in seeing, where we pull out of a very large continuum of care and form a tri-county continuum of care. And so I wanted you to have my contact information to be able to bring this topic to you, give you the opportunity to ask questions, and then also to be able to ask questions later, to reach out to me if you have other questions. And then I'll be coming back at a certain point to ask you for a resolution to support this. And I want to just be sure that you feel comfortable, that you understand what we're talking about, and that you have the opportunity to get any questions answered before that happens. So what is a continuum of care? It used to be that anybody could apply for funding from HUD when they would issue their federal NOFAs. And in particular for funding that was related to housing or homelessness. And over time, they gradually moved toward a system where they required anyone who wanted to apply for funding to be part of a continuum of care. And so continuum of care is the concept of a spectrum of care for people who are either precariously housed all the way to people who are unhoused and getting folks rehoused. But it's also it's a term that HUD uses routinely. And so they award the funds, and then this continuum is supposed to be the planning entity for your region, whatever that region happens to be that has identified itself. And so who makes up the members of a continuum of care? I've given a kind of a laundry list here. And I'm going to get around to this topic again in a moment of who's at the table. The continuum of care structure. So who provides the administrative support? It can be a municipality, it can be a agency, it can be a nonprofit entity. The Rural Oregon Continuum of Care contracts with the Community Action Partnership of Oregon to provide that service. I'm proposing that my agency, the Community Services Consortium, would initially be the administrator for a county continuum, because we are already doing some of the more fundamental requirements the continuum of care does, and we have funding from other sources to do that. Once the continuum forms itself, then the continuum itself gets to decide who they want to be the administrator of that continuum, what they want the rules to look like, how they want their policies to be formed, so forth. So who makes up a continuum of care? Cities, counties, regions. Again, a continuum of care gets to name who they want to be. They self-identify, and then they let HUD know. They have to register with HUD and say, this is the group that we represent. The reason why I included this little performance measure piece for you is I feel like it's important that you understand that continuums of care are measured by HUD on their performance. It includes everything from how long people stayed in homelessness once they fell into homelessness, how many times they returned to homelessness, if they got out of homelessness, when was their first experience of homelessness, just a whole host of things. And the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care, because it is such a large and disparate area, is not performing well by HUD standards. So when HUD uses this measurement to look at how well they're performing, they have a pretty low grade on their report card. And any time that the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care applies for funding, not only is the proposal itself rated and ranked, but their performance standard is applied to that. So if they have a poor performance and they get a good proposal, they still rank very low on their proposal when they look at across the nation at their competitors. And in this situation, the competition is extremely difficult. Half a point can make the difference between getting funding or not getting funding. So I don't foresee a way that the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care will ever perform substantially better. It's just too big and too diverse. I gave you a map of the different counties. The blue counties make up the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care on this map. The gray counties are separate and distinct continuums. And what kind of got me fired up about this whole issue is that the governor has really signaled her intent to send a lot of housing funding through several different systems. One is the Community Action Network. One is the tribal network of the 9 federally recognized tribes, and another is the Continuum of Care Network. So when the governor issued Executive Order 2302, she said, and these particular distinct counties, those gray counties on the map, are going to have certain amounts of money allocated between them and set aside a very large pot of in excess of $100 million. And those counties divided those funds. And there were no funding amounts associated with the other 26 counties that fell under the Executive Order 2303. So what later came out is the legislature passed House Bill 5019, and $26 million was allocated to be split between those counties. Not $1 million per county. There was a funding formula that was determined, and that was applied to the fund to the 26 million. And what really stood out for me is Jackson County alone got a direct allocation of $8.8 million. They have a smaller population than our population in the Tri-County region, and the Tri-County region together is going to split about $4 million. So if this is a plan for the future, we are going to continuously be left out of that process in our rural communities if we stay as part of the rural Oregon Continuum of Care. So for me, this is essential that we move forward. I know that y'all have heard a lot of information. You've been visited by the folks from the HOPE Advisory Board, from the Coordinated Council for Benton County and Corvallis. And I just wanted to kind of help you understand how this all fits in the system. So House Bill 4123 established funding for Benton County over 5 years, to establish a navigation center and to create a strategic plan for how they will address homelessness. And then House Bill 5019 created money that sets aside funding for Benton County to create 50 emergency housing beds and rehouse 31 individuals that were previously unhoused. All of the right people are at the table in these efforts. And this work is going forward, doing a great job. Everybody's talking together. Everybody's got great ideas. The strategic plan is coming together. The money under House Bill 5019 will provide some kind of pilot dollars so we can see if what we think is going to work is truly going to work, and give us the opportunity to tweak that and say, okay, now we want to figure out where the gaps are. We want to expand in certain areas, maybe drop certain areas and do other things. And what I'm hoping is that those groups that the governor has referred to as local planning groups or LPGs will move forward and permanently become the local representation in the continuum of care. And so far, those really are the folks who are at the table and who are interested in moving this initiative forward. Oopsie. So how is this connected to everything else going on regionally? Similarly, Lincoln County got House Bill 4123. Each of 3 counties that my agency represents got House Bill 5019 funding. And again, they've all stood up local planning groups, and all of those groups are interested in moving forward as part of the continuum. This map is interesting. I know you can't see a lot of the detail, and the detail is not important. What's important is for you to see the concept. Lincoln County hired a consultant with their House Bill 4123 funding, and this consultant mapped the individual organizations that touch housing and homelessness in some way in Lincoln County. And this is what the map looks like. So the larger the circle on the map, the more agencies touching that organization. So one of the big green circles on there is my agency, Community Services Consortium, because we do a lot of pass-through funding to shelters and to other types of housing operations that we don't personally run ourselves. And what this map includes is it includes nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations, the police department, the fire department, EMTs, because everybody's touching these same folks over and over again. But what this drove home for me is that we aren't collecting the data so that we don't understand the details of who we're serving, what the needs are, and what might be a more effective way of utilizing the resources that we're utilizing, how we can not duplicate one another's activities. And so a continuum of care, a local continuum of care will give us a much better opportunity to track that information and gather that information and analyze that information. Whoops, I don't know what happened here. Some of my little words left on the transfer list, so I apologize for that. But what this really was intended to show was that there's a whole range of services that all these folks are providing: street outreach, navigation, housing placement, case management, information and referral. There's an entire spectrum of housing ranging from emergency response housing to permanent supportive housing, to market rate housing that we can get people in and get housing subsidies for them. And then the data collection and the reporting process, because all funding comes with data reporting and collection and tracking requirements. And so all of that work has to be done in a very sustained way. And then having our own continuum will create a much better resource across the 3 counties to make sure that we're gathering and really looking at all of that information and working well collectively. So the next steps in the process, which by the way, Marion and Polk counties decided a few years ago they were going to pull out of the ROC for all the reasons that I'm concerned about now. And HUD had never had this happen before, so they had to hire a technical assistance provider for the HUD Portland field office and for Marion and Polk counties. And Marion and Polk counties have been super kind with us. They have shared their roadmap for how to do this. And one of the things I've been tracking on over the last few years is I had watched them losing money. And as they pulled out and formed their own continuum, slowly they're beginning to gain more resources. And while it's not about the money, it's really always about the money. So what happens with a continuum of care, and we know this, is that when you have momentum moving in the same direction and a lot of energy in that way, you will draw other resources. So this isn't that we're expecting to suddenly be just loaded with HUD resources, because that's not going to happen. They just aren't there. But what will happen is that we will all be more aware of what each entity is doing, how we can blend and combine our resources, and we'll be able to really work together on doing more grant obtaining and work where we're combining those resources. So I will be back for a resolution from you if you fit this concept. I will be asking for letters of support from all the providers that are doing this work. We will have a vote in each of the local planning groups to determine their support. And on July 20th, we held a Tri-County Regional Stakeholder Forum where unanimously the group voted to support this concept. Just a few other items that I'm going to need to pack up together and send to HUD, so they don't think that I just sat around in my office and figured this out on my own and did this on my own, but that you all are supporting me and that they have that documentation and they can see that we have all of the pieces in place to move forward in a really thoughtful and intentional way. So happy to answer any questions. And then, like I said, please don't hesitate to contact me directly if you'd like to talk more in detail.
Thank you for all this information. It's very helpful. I'm not familiar with the ROC. CAPO. Can you go into a little more detail of what those were?
Rural Oregon Continuum of Care. So each continuum of care has a snazzy name named by HUD. Ours is Continuum of Care 505 Oregon. And so the group of the 26 counties decided they would call themselves the Rural Oregon Continuum of Care. And by the way, you can find, they have a website if you'd like to look at that and see more information about that. And CAPO is the Community Action Partnership of Oregon. And that is the statewide network of the 18 community action agencies that serve all of the counties in Oregon. Some, like my agency, serve multiple counties. Some only serve one county. We're part of a national network of more than 1,100 community action agencies.
Your clients, the homeless people, do they pushback on giving the information, like how long have they been homeless and where have they been and what have they done
Great
for your
question.
data
Yes,
collection?
100% they do. Some people are so used to giving information. Other people say, I don't even want to talk to you. Not going to tell you this information. And that's part of why the point in time count process is so inconsistent, so difficult to really get good data, because people can say, I just don't want to give you any information. And then the other thing is that some people genuinely are unable to really give good information. So one of the questions that we're required to ask people on an intake process is, how many times have you been homeless or have you been? And many people just answer the
The administration side, I'm assuming that entails a lot of how funds and programs get dispersed. Does it also hinge on the planning and the creating the projects and the request for funds that go up, and how is that? How do you envision that working between the three counties?
Another great question. So let me tell you a little bit about how it works with the ROC, and I envision it happening similarly. So the ROC has an executive board. The members have all voted for a president, a vice president, a secretary, and so forth. And that group acts as the rule-making body and the body that's kind of the final approving body. But there's also, as I mentioned, an administrative organization that they contract with. And that organization provides staffing that supports the meetings. And the group has multiple committees that HUD requires that they have. So like you need an effort around homeless and runaway and homeless youth. You need effort around diversity, equity, and inclusion. You need an effort around the point in time. And so those individual committees then are made up of the members. And similarly, there's a group called the Rating and Ranking Committee. So if each of us represented an affordable housing developer or a shelter or some sort of service provider that was providing services to the homeless, what would happen is you could decide, I want to submit a proposal. You bring your proposal to the Rating and Ranking group. The Rating and Ranking group looks at your performance. They look at your proposal. The entire planning group talks about what is needed in the community that is being served by that continuum of care. And then they make a decision, a recommendation to the executive committee about which proposals go forward. You have to rank the proposals in two separate tiers. Your primary tier usually is the group of entities that you want to get new funding for another cycle of funding. So for example, perhaps you have an affordable housing development that was already receiving continuum of care funding. You want them to continue to get continuum of care funding so they can remain active in the community. And now you've got some new proposals. And so you may put the new proposals in tier 2, but if there's sufficient funding, then everybody gets funding. But if there's not sufficient funding, then the top tier gets the funding. And what often happens with HUD is if there's insufficient funding, they will take away funding out of your tier 2, and then they will give it to other communities like Chicago, like Los Angeles, like San Diego. And so part of why I was interested in what was happening with Marion and Polk counties was I wanted to see what was happening with their tier 1 and tier 2 projects, and those are consistently getting funded. Another example of what happens with this is Jackson Street Youth Services a couple of years ago had an opportunity to apply for some runaway and homeless youth funding to expand their services. And the ROC membership said, well, we can't do that in every single county. We're not willing to do what's required. So we're not going to allow you to put that proposal forward. And so they had a very competitive proposal, but they weren't even considered by the ROC. So I'm assuming there will be a somewhat similar structure across the county continuum here, and then those local planning group members will make up the voting membership of that group.
Okay, I think the last question, we can move on. We'll have another conversation when we have to pass resolutions.
I might just be overthinking this, but.
You were the semicolon guy.
If, because I mean, it sounds like, right, we're just sort of part of this larger group, so we don't always get maybe the attention that we like. Are there other parts of the rock that are thinking about leaving and doing a similar thing as like you said, Marion and Polk County are doing it, now we're doing it. I guess my question is just, if everyone's splitting up, then will it still be a net positive, or will it still just be the same pie spread out over the same area, but the areas have now been have different borders?
I'm not, I don't know. I
Okay.
can't speak to what other areas are thinking of doing. Primarily, what has been a problem from my perspective is that a lot of the far eastern Oregon counties just don't have the bandwidth to do a lot of the same work that we're trying to do in our Tri-County region, and especially in the valley. So that's what happened with Marion and Polk, and we were feeling similarly. We thought about pulling out and going with Marion and Polk, but our county commissioners in each of the three counties were like, we kind of have a lot of things that are just isolated to the three counties, so we might like to keep our own area. I'm not aware of any others that are going to go out, but that doesn't mean that it was.
Well, thank you very much, Peggy. Really appreciate you being here, and I look forward to some of that resolution come through this.
Great, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Did you want to?
It's in there if you'd like.
And Chris is pointing out that the resolution is in the packet. If we have wanted, we could make a motion to pass it tonight if you want.
Got that the correct resolution number is 23-20.
Would anybody be in support of the motion to put that forward tonight? Councilor Crocker?
I would move that we support this and pass the resolution.
Excellent. Got a second. So I have a motion made by Councilor Crocker and seconded by Councilor Andrade. Any further discussion?
And was that actually a motion to adopt resolution 20 supporting the county Continuum of Care organization?
It was, thank you.
Councilor Cossey.
I think before we vote on the resolution, because we're a relatively small community, I'd like to know what type of support the Continuum would be looking for us.
Great question. So currently, as I mentioned, CSC is doing a lot of the work. A Continuum is responsible for overseeing the point in time count, for managing a coordinated entry system where you do vulnerability assessments and people get a list, and then also for managing the homeless management information system that's required by HUD to collect the data for the clients. So we're already doing that. We're already paying for that with other funding that we have. Right now, we have the House Bill 4123 funding, and we have the House Bill 5019 funding that will provide some additional administrative financial support for CSC to do all of the work of the Continuum. I don't know what that will look like going forward. Marion and Polk counties have some cities that are voting members, and they make that decision by their ability to contribute financially to the operation of the Continuum. But that was entirely their decision. I will actively be advocating with the legislature to find some way to provide sustainable funding for continuums of care, especially since the governor has signaled her interest in utilizing the Continuum of Care network to administer funding. So I don't know the answer at the end. It's really what the Continuum decides to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Excellent. Any further discussion on the motion or resolution? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Aye. Aye.
Thank you also.
Thank you. Being here, appreciate it. Next, we have consent agenda, which includes minutes from September 11th. City Council meeting. And then welcome a motion to pass them as we go to.
Couple of corrections.
Okay.
Page 54, line 30. Strike Nielsen, put in Lehman. Because Nielsen was absent. And that was here. And. That's a positive. Found page 51, line 16. In front of the name Andrade. Insert the word no.
So I'll make a motion to pass the consent agenda as corrected. Motion by myself, second by Councilor Kazi. Any further discussion? All in favor, please use your hand, say aye. Aye. All opposed, please use your hand. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Great. Thank you. So next we have a conversation about ARPA funds, one of our favorite topics of usually. Chris, did you want to kind of give us an update on?
Yeah, and I'm gonna start by inviting the rest of my management team up to the hot seats here. And while they're going, there's nothing like, that's like free money to, cause a little stirring. And I'll just say, a lot of this has been estimates on projects in good faith. I recognize we're trying to spread these funds out and do as much good as possible with them. Obviously, as we've gone further along with each of these projects, we've brought you back updates on cost estimates. Those cost estimates have gotten closer and closer. Now we're to the point of actually getting bids, and we're seeing different numbers than what you were given in those estimates. So, we can only pass on as good of information as we have. Fortunately, that information is getting better. Unfortunately, it's getting more expensive. And so all of the things that we thought we were going to do with all the ARPA funding from a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, and pour it off. That funding isn't going to go as far as we had hoped it would go because the cost of almost all of those projects has gone up from what we thought it was going to be a month and a half, 2 months ago. So the memo, hopefully everybody's had a chance to go through that and look at those numbers, and hopefully somebody's got a great solution that they'll just put on the table. But probably helpful to go through them just one by one. I do Mike and Chelsea and Ruth and Kevin, who couldn't be here tonight, for drafting this memo while I was at ICMA conference last week. They pulled in a lot of detail, and again, this is coming from actual bids, not estimates, which is where we're at. Why the numbers are going to look different. So the backup powers, we'll kind of take them one at a time. The backup power for the water supply, this is up on Starlight Summit. Originally, the council directed for 60,000 of ARPA funds and 60,000 of water funds to go towards this project. It's in the capital improvement plan at $120,000, which was the estimate that we originally had. As I reported last month, Public Works did some conversation or has some conversations with companies that are a company that would provide this type of generator. So when we first heard that these are out quite a ways, we're now hearing that for our generator that we would need, we'd be 36 weeks out. And that we would be able to do the project with Public Works doing some of the work. We would be able to still do that project with a $120,000 budget item, which is where we're at. The wrinkle in here, as I described last month, is that we have applied for a FEMA grant that would cover the entire cost of this project without having to use ARPA funds or without having to dip into water fund reserves or any other water fund transfer. Appreciate Mike's recommendation here that we rather than look at contingency for this year, let's just look to budget that money with water fund money that we could transfer into liable equipment for next year's budget. So those are kind of the things that are on the table. That's the wrinkle, right? Is do we use the one-time ARPA funds for this and just be done with it? Or do we lean on getting the grant, which was what kind of the original plan was when we adopted the budget? We go that route, wait for the grant and proceed that direction. So there's the wrinkle. I don't know if it's more helpful to talk about that one specifically now, or to kind of go through all those and give an overview, how the council like to
Let's talk
progress.
about that now.
When do you expect to hear about the grant? And thank you for submitting the application.
Yeah. I've got a good point of contact. His name's Shannon. Give you all the details of his life because he's very talkative. He is really good to work with. It's looking like grant submittals we had until, give me a month's right, we had until October 31st to submit a grant, which we've already submitted. It sounds like it's a rolling type deal, so we would have some time there. He was saying by the end of the year, we would like final no, yes or no. There's a few steps between now and then. Getting to the next level, making sure that we're making it to the long list. That long list then has to go and get approval, kind of final approval as a batch. And so, but he said by the end of the year, we would know.
What's the timeline again for ARPA fund? Like if we set aside still this and of ARPA for this project, and then the end of the year we find out grant, we still have some time to spend that 60,000 on something else. Is that right? Or
Mike, you've been in communications better there. You want to?
Through December 2027.
oh, okay.
We've got to be like 2025. We got to
Tell them. Yeah. Okay.
Got to spend it before that, or we got to say by 2025, we're going
Okay.
to this.
Okay.
2 years after that to spend it.
Okay. So it's not unreasonable then to maybe keep that money for another few months to see how the grant goes, and then if we don't need to spend it on that. We could, okay.
Councilor Nielsen, did you have a question?
No, that was my question.
Thanks. Good work. Good question. Well, talk about the primary school pickup area.
So primary school picker, that project's done. Hopefully I was able to chance to go by. We saved $400 there because we only had to spend 3,000 instead of 34. But again, kudos to Public Works. Gary Black got stuff ordered, found it at the right price, got it installed. It looks great. So there's, again, like originally we'd assigned 3,400 there. Did it for about 4, or excuse me, did it for about 3. We paid about 400.
Happy with it?
I honestly haven't talked to the school district about it yet, other than to say it's up and got any feedback. So I'm sure they love it.
Yeah.
Down in Forest.
Down in Forest, that check's being cut. So again, there was kind of a balance of the 6,600 originally. I think I reported last month, that's money that's going to go directly towards the cost the school district incurred of having to have somebody that grind up all of the roots and all the limbs and everything else and do kind of the prep work. They still had an increased expense of getting the mulch and other stuff delivered. The PTA paid for some of that, and others other funds kind of came in, but that money they essentially earmarked to pay for just kind of that initial cleanup phase, just to get up top to be able to fit everything. And they had the Merriam Invitational on Saturday, 7,700 something students in town. It was crazy. It was busy all Saturday long. So it was really cool that the event still went forward.
I just found out that because it's been rebuilt, they're going to host the district cross-country meeting in there, which was not originally planned. So this is a huge impact, I think, that we need.
So that check, I don't know that it's actually inked yet, but we're got coordination and who it's going to and all that's happening. Counting on those funds coming. So I would strongly recommend. It's been signed?
I think I signed.
Okay.
Yeah.
13th Street lighting, originally we were at the estimate at the budget level was about 20,000 per light, 8 lights, $160,000. We had company come out to look at it. It is the company that is doing the lights for the streetscape project. They've been on site, they've met with their bid, or the estimate we got from them. No, the bid we got from them was 215,000. So what's that, 55,000 more than what we had estimated the budget would be. So 215,000 minus the 80,000 of ARPA funds that were allocated for that were $135,000 short. For being able to put it in all of those. With that. Okay. Concurring playground surface is another one that kind of came in a little bit later in the review process. The city council originally put $10,000 of ARPA funds towards that effort. And I'll be the first to apologize. The numbers that I was given, talking to vendors, was to estimate between $8 and $11, and $11 per square foot. The numbers I provided you, I think I estimate up at the $11 per square, and it was still way under. So whatever happened to these prices between what I was reading, who I was talking to, and the estimate, this is a different surface. It's a grass, or kind of an artificial turf type surface. The contractor, the installer that we're talking to, says that they're really not doing the pour in place very much anymore. It is kind of the inferior product, and the artificial turf has come so far with the padding underneath everything else. That is where playgrounds are going to for ADA compliant fall surface playground materials. That's what you're seeing in all of the new parks that are being built. In his discussions, Chelsea, kind of correct me if I'm wrong, if we went back to doing the pour in place, we're kind of going backwards a little bit, right? It's not the new technology.
Pour in place and the rubber tiles are more expensive than this, so it would be more than 107,000. Yes, and a lot of parks are doing that. I just saw Eugene just built a park and they did put this same surface in. And I just want, Diane had commented on the coolness of it. It actually, I did read about it's cooler than rubber. So that was the thing that Diane brought up last time, but yeah, it's more expensive. I think this is just a sign of the times. Also, our park is a prevailing wage project, because it is a park, big project over 50,000. And it will require a change order because we bid the project out without this surface, and it requires a change order for the contractor that's currently there. So that that's an addition to the 107,000.
You've got 107 plus the 5 for the different type of curbing essentially that goes around the surface. So 112,269 minus just the 10,000 of ARPA funds going towards it means $102,000. Originally we thought maybe we could pull some SDC grant money or some SDC money, park money or something. We don't have the 102,000 in SDC park funds we can pull for this project. It's just sizably a much bigger, more expensive project than what we really thought it was going to be.
Nothing more. I guess my question was just about like maintenance and upkeep of that surface. I mean, because if it's just engineered wood fiber, I presume the maintenance of that is just dumping more.
Putting more in.
Whereas I imagine this would be significantly more, like if someone rips it or something.
Sure.
Do you have any idea sort of what our ongoing costs would be?
I don't know the ongoing costs, but I did look at like a comparison chart of the different surfaces. And I think this surface, the rubber surfaces, they're all pretty similar on when I said what are the ongoing maintenance costs, they were all pretty similar. The engineered wood fiber is obviously going to be the lowest cost. It's not cheap by any means because it's not just wood chips. In some places it is. But it is going to be the more affordable option, although I think the durability of these ADA surfaces is longer, so I don't know over time, because you do have to replace the engineered fiber chips under swings and things. They get displaced all the time, they get compacted, so it's hard to say. We could look into it more.
When you were looking at the information about the turf versus tiles on the floor, was that like on the manufacturer's website, or was that like, where can I find that information? Because I would like to look at that.
I did look on this. I looked in several places. So I looked at the Playground Reps site because sell a bunch of different types of products, so they're not just saying you need to get this. And I can send that to you. Thank you. Where that was, and then I also did look at the actual product that they're recommending. That's obviously the product site. And just also to keep in mind, this is state bid pricing. This is a federal contract for this product. And so, we can get more bids. They're probably going to be companies that are also state bid, and they're going to be probably really similar to this cost. So it's not like we just call the contractor and their price is really high. So just to keep that in mind as well. But yeah, I can send that to you. So you can get that.
Thank you.
And the last project to hit on, got brought up at last meeting was the radar sign enforcement. That's when Chief Rubin and Lieutenant Gursky to look at that and commend them. They did some in-depth work there. They've got some friends in high places that have got work-on experience. So hopefully you're able to read through the memo on that. I think there's a lot of momentum there from the police department. They're really excited about the concept, but again, a lot more expensive than what we were originally thinking. So the memo said this isn't like a one-time expense, like buying a radar sign, and we would have it to install. These programs are programs that require staffing. They require, typically it's like a lease agreement that you sign, and so you've got an ongoing monthly cost. You've got some personnel expense there because somebody has to review every single one of those, do mailings and the whole bit. So it would require, I mean, if we were to do this from day one to day two, it's going to require more staffing than what we currently have and a bigger budget than what we currently have in the police department to do it. And the idea of choosing one-time ARPA funds, this type of enforcement just wouldn't be, there's not enough money there to make that happen, and there'd be ongoing expenses would go. So the recommendation here, I'm not sure which of you did that section with Chelsea. The recommendation was to have the police committee look at it further and see into it. But again, based on the memo from Chief Rubin, it's something that they're excited about, could see some real possibilities of helping. A pretty big expense there that's not really been considered yet.
That's my one.
This might be a question for the police committee if it's not addressed, but I was just curious. It talks a lot about the expense. I was curious about the revenue and if it is like a net loss still, because obviously, hopefully this would catch more speeding people, which would then result in more speeding tickets. And I know it said that only a very small, but not very small, like half of those tickets went through. So I guess maybe the question for the police committee, does that, how does that end up offsetting? Is that like half the cost? Is that the full cost? Is that an eighth of the cost? Just to kind of give us an idea.
What's the return on investment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll look at that, and don't use the term return on investment with Ken Rubin. But because this is really about increasing the safety.
Right,
and if we
yes,
can do
and
it
I'm not
for
trying to be
that much
cynical.
Money.
I meant return.
It's just, I think it's important because this talks a lot about how much it would cost. I think it's important to acknowledge it would also.
Are we-
Right, yeah,
Right, even if it breaks even and we.
Right, exactly. Seems great, yeah.
And I think that's appropriate for the committee to look at. Again, there's some rough numbers in here. I'm looking at bullet point 8 on the very last page where it said 70% of red light applications were rejected. So 30% of those that are getting them are actually being done, and there's reasons for all that. And I've talked to Chief Rubin on that a little bit on some of the specifics. But again, that's all good information, I think, for the committee to take a look at. I don't think you would be seeing these agencies implementing them if there were big money sinks where they were losing a bunch of money. I do think it's interesting that even with these larger departments and much larger cities and that they have a few of them, right? So it may be that they're not really making a lot of money. They're really just implementing them for the increased safety, knowing it's gonna cost money, but I don't know that for sure, right? So yeah, it's definitely worth looking into a little more.
Okay. Now we can have more of a free for all. I'll just point out that we've made 3 notes. Sounds like if we end up getting the grant, that for the water the backup power supply or the generator, if we got that, that would free up $120,000.
60 of all.
60 of ARPA plus 60 of water fund contingency. So. Yeah, little lots of money. The 13th Street lights. The sum total is that it needs an additional 135. And again, from different pots, 80 of which get ARPA. What?
Isn't it 55 that's needed for
The street fund, oh yeah, it's 55 additional. Plus there's the street funds or the general fund, that'd be a total expensive. And then the last one is that the playground surface needs another $102,000. In order to actually be implemented as it.
102,260.
Appreciate that. Around. So some back home with that.
Or even big numbers.
I'll bit more.
I guess my question was about the sort of how long the bid for the street lighting lasts, because it seems like the ideal scenario is that we get this grant for backup power. We have 60,000 of ARPA that we don't have to spend on that, which covers the additional 55,000 increase for street lighting. I'm just curious, that $215,000 bid was now, I'm assuming it will not be that in December or January.
I'm guessing it's probably 30 days and just,
Okay,
it is, we did just get the one estimate.
sure,
It did take some time. We had to, have several staff members meet on site to look at,
okay.
it's not straightforward because they're having to retrofit some things and, that's to be expected when you're putting something in. But I'm guessing that it's 30 days.
And do we think that would, like, if we end up letting that expire and then bid again in like January?
I think the issue is that the way things are going, all of the material costs are going up. And it seems like construction costs are just going up. So unless something happens overall where that starts to come down, but if that trend keeps going, you can expect it to be higher. How much? It's crazy.
Benefit in talking to the contractor out on site was, again, they're the ones that have bid out for all the rest of them, and it was obvious, he was like, obviously having us here now.
Right.
You're not paying the additional fee to
Go there.
we're here. So, I mean, he acknowledged, and, I didn't put a dollar number by, but he acknowledged, obviously, this is the least expensive time to put in these lights. We're already here installing everything else. The fact that you don't have a time frame on exactly when they get put in, and we could just put them in when we're doing the rest of them. Was huge for them. So that, I think this is probably the lowest price that we're gonna see on that project.
Ordering the lights too is a big thing because they're in the process of ordering. So
And
adding on lights to an order or ordering them at the same time or some other times is probably part of what they're factoring in.
do we know when they're gonna put in the existing order for lights on Main Street?
I don't know where that falls on the schedule. No, unfortunately, I'm not sure.
And with respect to Cochrane Park, I know you mentioned that Park and Rec grants are competitive, but have we applied for a grant for this? Can we?
We've not applied for a grant for this for the park. We were leaning on our park fees and our park STCs for this park and then donations. The grant cycle for this year for Oregon Parks and Rec has closed already. I believe it opens up again in, let's say, March or April of next year. When the cycle opens again. We're at a little bit of a cross in that we've got, or a road crossing, and that we've got several kind of potential park projects coming up. I think it was noted in here about maybe looking at Mill Pond Park as that neighborhood develops and that next park goes in. And again, it's mentioned that maybe we can look at doing something in that park. The nice part about leveraging what's happening there is you've already got a developer that's being required to put private funds in the park. We could kind of leverage those as matching funds, right? So if you're looking at let's just make up numbers. Say you're talking about a $1 million park. You've got a developer that's putting $450,000 to $500,000 into that park already, and the difference of that, and then you could ask for the grant for, you're still only asking for 30 or 40% of the total cost of the project in grant funds. As opposed to what usually happens is, we've got a minimum, I think 40% match now for Oregon Parks and Rec grants. So typically what they're seeing is the city's scratching by to get 40% of the total project cost, and we're asking for 60%. With Mill Pond Park, that would be flipped, and that's not the official name of the park. That hasn't been decided yet, but I just caught that. We're just calling it Mill Pond Crossing Park because that's where it's located. So there would be some good leverage there, which would score us higher on that issue. And then outside of that, we've got the skate park issue where we've done the feasibility study. I think we're still looking to see what kind of local money can be raised, some grassroots efforts to be put up. Very consistently, when you look at Parks and Recreation grants at the state level that go for skate parks, almost unequivocally, there's a grassroots effort that's come together and has done some fundraising for a year or two or more, and has pulled some sources together to show that there's community support for the project. So we will probably be in that phase. I don't know why we would think we'd be the exception. So I think we're still looking at a few years of doing that and then applying for a state Parks and Rec grant for leveraging that. And again, we're still going to need our 40% for that project as well. So you can't go to that well every year. So I think, when we look into this body and also look into our park advisory board to make some prioritizations on what are we going to try to fund first and what other things are we going to try to fund other ways through SDCs, through the developer, et cetera.
And how much do we have STCs?
I knew that question was going to come up. I could, but yeah.
I know you said we can't apply for a grant every year. What is the amount of time that needed between winning a grant and being able to apply for it again?
That's more of an art than a science.
Apply if your project's completed but
They're-
applying year to year to year.
The state park grants are very competitive. It's not uncommon at all just to know you're not going to get awarded the first time or second time you go through
With the same project or?
project.
Yeah.
We had to go twice or three times for the Flossie Overman Park. I think it was the second attempt. It might have been third, but I think it was the second attempt. And because they wanted to see, on the first submittal, they had some feedback, like, we don't like this, we don't like the power lines overhead in that park. And so there were things that added to the cost of the project that we had to cough up that money and come to it with a better proposal for a different park that didn't have the overhead power lines. There's one or two members on that committee that were just adamant, we're not going to fund this park as long as there's power lines, 10 feet in the air. And they were power lines, they were cable lines or whatever, but nonetheless, once that got removed, then they looked at it and we scored much better. And again, I imagine a skate park or anything that we went to with, they're just competitive, I guess is the way I leave it. There's large parks and rec departments at much larger cities that are competing for those same funds that you've got a staff our size and volunteer. So already at a disadvantage. You just got to have a really strong project and it makes it easier.
Okay, more.
What has the engagement with? Has there been engagement with the park advisory board on this? Just because I know we had talked about, in the park master plan, it already talks about redoing Triangle Park and stuff like that. And obviously this is a good idea. Since we have the park advisory board, I guess I'm curious, I don't want us to sort of just decide we want to do something else, even though we've tasked them with kind of coming up with that. If this would be better to do at Triangle Park, since that's already in the master plan as the next sort of renovation or something, as opposed to doing it at a different part.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. More, and I really do. That we adopt these. We work really hard to get plans in place, have consultants come in, get them adopted, go through the public process of getting them adopted. And if we don't follow them, we kind of do ourselves a disservice, right? So, there is a priority, kind of a tier 1 priority project, a list of projects there. Triangle Park is in need of new playground equipment, fall surface. I mean, and it is that next one that's on that list. You know, I think we're all a little guilty of this, and I'll admit I'm guilty of it at least. In source, the first instinct is, oh, there's funding. Oh, what can we do with it? As opposed to, oh, there's funding. Great. We have these projects that would be nice to finally be able to fund. It's so easy to try to look for new shiny things to spend money on, as opposed to going back to the plans and saying, well, what's our plan? What's our next thing that we wanted to fund? And I'm looking there. So in that vein, yeah, Triangle Park needs some attention. You know, there's not a real active, as in politically active neighbor. We're not hearing from people up near that park. Nobody's complaining. There's no squeaky wheel for Triangle Park. The Lions Club is probably the most engaged there because they've kind of adopted that and they've paid for a lot of equipment that's there now. Which is it's just dated and it just needs to be replaced. But it wasn't that long ago they didn't have good fall surface either, and we've added the chips for the fall surface, which is much better than what was there before. But it's looking a little tired. It could use some help, and it's the next one on the list. We can go back to the Park Advisory Board and ask them for opinion. The new fall surface at the Veterans Memorial Park. I think timeliness made sense because we were working on that now. It kind of made sense. And there's always going to be exceptions to the plans that you put together. So I think it was worth looking at, but the price tag on it is just a little bit startling to me on how much more we're going to be doing. And, you know, there is something to be said, and I'll just float it out there, not advocating one or another. We could put the chips in there as planned and revisit this in another year or 2 or 4 and look to, you know, once the chips are done and worn out, it's really inexpensive to pull chips out and then come in later with these funds. If there's another funding source or we want to save up SDCs, talk to the park board about prioritizing ADA compliant fall surfaces and kind of work its way that way. But again, I'm comfortable either direction. I think it's a good way to go. It's a lot of money that we didn't plan to spend this year. It's not the $20 or $30 or $40,000 we're kind of hoping it was good. Yeah, it's tough. Mr. Clark.
Have we looked at grants from an ADA angle rather than a parks angle?
The Parks and Rec grant?
Well, not looking at the Parks and Rec grant, saying we're gonna make this ADA accessible because we're putting in a different surface and seeing if we can get some federal dollars from that.
ARP.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would help us. I know you said not that grant, but it would help us be more competitive on a park grant of some sort. I can't tell you outside of the state Parks and Rec grant, I can't tell you a lot of other places that are giving money away for park stuff, even for ADA compliance. Maybe the foundation, maybe Ford Family Foundation or some of those others, they're tend to be more interested in economic development and that sort of thing. Parks are just tough. They're, you know, outside of the state funding and local funding, they're a tough one.
I had a question about something that you had just said. You know, you said that we could put chips in and then revisit like once we were out and potentially save SDCs for that. Am I misremembering that SDCs are only for expansion of use as opposed to?
It's a new park. You're not
Even though it's not a new park, 3 or 4 years in.
So depending on what your plan says, it may be that having an ADA surface is expanding the use of the park because you've got a population who would not be able to use it.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question.
What percentage that would be, you know, that becomes a interesting numbers game.
A percentage.
So what do we need to decide? Does it tell you what to do?
So. There's a few of these that are more timely than others.
Yeah.
And. But the ARPA funds aren't like this huge rush either. I mean, we kind of maybe artificially made them a little rush just because it'd be nice to, there's all those projects out there, let's fund them, right? And so I think it's still a good exercise that we've gone through. A lot of good decisions and a lot of good has already been done with the use of these ARPA funds. So I don't think anything's lost here, but it would be helpful to get some guidance. For the council on any of these before it. To me, the big one that stands out is going to be on the street lights. There's a timeliness issue there. Do we want to allocate any additional funds out of that original $80,000 towards the street lighting? Or do we just want to save the 80,000 and then we're going to look for another 135 out of the street fund somewhere? Or do we want to put additional ARPA funds towards that 135 so that we're not pulling other money out of street fund? And Mike's got to figure out.
I haven't heard anything on urban renewal yet in the street project. You know, I'm sitting here crunching numbers. We're working on the audit right now. And so the numbers are starting to settle down where I can see beginning balances for next year. And URA is coming in pretty healthy balance. But I'm gonna have to set some of it aside for the bioswale and then for any operations this year. There might be $100,000 that we can put to the street project if we need it.
Let me ask you a question about this backup power supply. If. So it's 36 weeks out. Does that mean when we order it, are we then obligating the funds or are we spending the funds when it actually comes in? Like what's our operation?
Sounds like we can order the, we may have already ordered the generator. And I think we're waiting for a final go, but
We did order the generator.
so it's been ordered. It's.
So you're obligated to pay it, but you aren't necessarily.
And
We have 36 weeks to figure out how we're gonna pay for it.
Mhm.
36 months is.
36 months out, 36 weeks. Well, I thought it said 36 weeks.
Okay, 36 weeks,
Yeah.
much sooner than.
Months. I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a second.
You only have one fiscal year.
But if we obligate the funds in next year's budget, do we feel like that would be a concern, or do we feel like we have the funds? For next year's?
I think we'll figure something out by then.
Councilman Warren.
I think what makes the most sense to me, if we have enough money in urban renewal, is we go ahead and put engineered wood fiber at Cochrane Park. We use 80,000 ARPA plus the balance of urban renewal for 13th Street lights. And then we keep 60,000 saved of ARPA for the generator. If we get the grant, then that 60,000 of ARPA goes into an account to save for accessible surface replacement in the future, in addition to park SDCs down the road.
And saying, please reserve and what do you mean by that?
What?
You want to put the 60,000?
Oh, just we put like, we can put it in, yeah, land building. Like, right, yeah, thank you.
It's restricted for.
Well, I just, yeah, okay, I'll move that. I just, I'm thinking out loud, so I'll move that. I guess, can I move it even though we're not like 100% sure what our urban renewal money is?
So, yeah, the last time we talked about urban renewal, yeah. So last time we talked about urban renewal, this comment after the second.
Yeah.
Mary Jones, that's it. Yeah, last time we talked about urban renewal, the only caution there was the streetscape project, right? And it's like all consuming and we've got a contingency there that's fairly healthy, but we've got commitments that we've made to the streetscape project that we don't want to find ourselves short of funds at the end of that project. So that's the only caution there. I'm feeling optimistic that we're gonna have other funds, or we're gonna have to pull from the street fund to pay for what we could have otherwise used urban renewal funds for, whether we're using street funds for that or street funds for this. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a cost associated with it. We're not talking in the millions of dollars. But I don't want a little, $135,000, but again, we're not talking $500,000. There's things that we can pull back on, and there's ending fund balances that maybe just aren't as large because we had to put more into LBE this year. But if we're pointing to capital projects that are needed and necessary, going to improve the city, you're gonna have a hard time finding people that are going to complain that you're overspending, so to say, right? It's like we're spending funds on things that are needed. And, again, we're talking 150, 160 by the time you do park and other things. So you're just not talking a whole bunch of money relative to the overall budget. And that doesn't mean spend like crazy.
Yeah.
But again, I think we're trying to do the most good with the funds that we have.
Counselor Cosby.
I'm just wondering about the park surface. Is it so urgent that we need to put the wood chips in now? We could wait till the end of the year and put in the
park is, I know it seems like it's not progressing, but they now are mobilizing in full force on the park. So I don't have a determined date, but it's not a huge park. I don't predict that it's going to take them a whole lot of time to be done with their portion of the park. We have some other things adding on the memorial itself, or in works with another subcontractor to look at that. But as far as the park goes, the plantings go, they're getting in there and doing that work. So I think that's the timeliness, is that what do you do if we don't have an answer for what we want to do in that area? Just do they leave? And we have a pit like on Parks and Rec. So I think that's the concern, is determining to do something with it so that.
I know we keep asking Chris questions. Did you find that park SDC number?
I don't have our balance, Mike, and I'm looking in the budget itself, which is just for this year and doesn't have all the balances there. We've got. That's not where it was. I mean, I'm showing our park improvement outlay going through was 188, but I think that's all money that's going towards the park. It's not showing like a SDC balance.
Good night.
I do believe that part came in higher than we projected. Yeah. Just the existing part of it and the memorial itself. I have one estimate that came in higher than we thought for that as well. This is just the
follow-up question to that is the current budget of the park includes the engineered wood.
That's what
library. So, okay, so like if we do that, that's not, we don't have to spend the 10,000 on.
no, yeah, that was what the project was bid out to install.
So that 10,000 could still be saved for replacing, like we could put that into land building equipment or something.
Oh, the 10,000 that you had
Yeah.
kind of earmarked.
Yeah, okay.
Mike, Mike, if we were to remove the funds, the ARPA funds from the Cochran Playground, could you come up, is there a spending different pots of money that could pay for the streetlights and the backup power? Can you just like, I know we have a motion on the table, but can you just tell us what would make sense?
Well, we have buckets, some of them are specific, want to be used for certain things, like urban renewal is for streets, and that's the way y'all have set it up in the past. Streets itself is for streets, not much money there. Water is for water, but the last couple of years, you put a lot of money into the water treatment plant, so.
Yeah.
We're in a rebuild mode right in that one right now. We could look at the LPE. I mean, Chris is looking that up, and the SDCs are.
You're actually watching YouTube.
I mean, those are the two buckets that we could look at. What are we What do we have in there that it's not gonna get done this year, we can push it out next year, within the projects.
I guess I'm wondering if we, can just prioritize the projects and then ask staff to just come back to us with a specific plan that, we don't have to like shuffle all the books right now, but let them kind of tell us what makes sense.
I mean, I think we're not shuffling that much.
Yeah, I don't know,
So Park SDC, let me answer Councilor Andrade's question. Park SDC's cash carryover from last year into this fiscal year was 321,397. We were anticipating, we budgeted to spend 178,100 on Cochrane Veterans Memorial Park. And then another 10,000 towards Mill Pond Park upgrades, which we're not gonna spend because they're not far enough along this summer to spend that money. So that will leave us a balance of, at the end of the year, if we don't spend anything else, 230,511.
That will be lost, I think, because of the bid for the.
Yeah, the overage on the park is going to take some of that. And zero that down, right? And we want to keep the balance in there because that's what we're going to use for
Oh, the Kirk project,
Yeah,
the skate.
Mill Pond Park.
We down a couple.
Roller Sports Park. We've got what we call the Roller Sports Park feasibility study. We come out with $300,000 earmarked for next year.
without like voting on this motion right now, but can I just get a sense for like, how are the counselors feeling about the ideas of prioritizing those two projects? Just kind of wanting to get a sense for us before we.
Prioritizing
The backup power supply or the generator is already ordered, so that's prioritized clearly.
Can I?
Do you want the motion? I did, but I can say it again.
Say it again.
Yes.
Motion.
Okay. I move that Cochrane Park have engineered wood fiber and that the 13th street lights are funded with $80,000 of ARPA funds and fund the rest through the balance of the urban renewal agency, and then keep $60,000 of ARPA funds earmarked for backup power for water supply, but with the condition that if that project is fully funded through the OEM grant, then that $60,000 will go to land building and equipment for park surface upgrades. How was that?
I think it's pretty clear.
Okay. And the 10,000 that's currently earmarked for park surface upgrades would also go to land building and equipment for park surface upgrades, but not be spent right now.
And you seconded that motion.
Yes. You still second that?
Yes.
But that doesn't give us enough for the lights.
Well, the urban renewal.
Oh, taking some of
Yeah.
the urban renewal.
Okay.
Thank you. Does that win a record?
I don't know about that, but.
Yeah.
No, just going through it in order.
Driving.
Well, I appreciate the motion. I feel very strongly that the Cochrane Park should have ADA accessible surface. The timeliness of it being one thing, this would be a great test, as we've all stated before. I think also the fact that it's specifically meant for all generations and for people, veterans, a lot of whom are disabled and have, difficulty moving around, that we should really prioritize this park to have that kind of surfacing. As to how to fund it, I don't think we should use all of the SDCs, but I do think that, you know, to try to kind of find a compromise between everything. I would think for all of these, for these projects to do half ARPA, half through whatever the other pot is of pot of money. So like in this case, it would be parks. For the street lights, we could just use the remaining balance for like through the urban renewal for like I know that we're in rebuilding mode for the water treatment plant, but for the water pot of money. And also, again, we're going through with it. Hopefully we'll get the entire cost, you know, covered through a grant. I just think it's really important that we prioritize funding of the alternative surface for the ground.
To Councilor Andrade's point, you mentioned a starting balance of park SDCs of over 300,000. But it's not clear after you subtract the other things you mentioned and allow for some carryover. How much do you think we would for this mark?
Share my screen.
Can I just ask like a clarifying question while you're doing?
Sure, because this probably is gonna take me a minute.
Okay. I guess this, and this might actually be a Jim question. I just, as far as spending urban renewal, like, can we vote to spend urban renewal money right now? Because then we have to have an urban renewal.
You'd have a plan and it.
Okay. So we're voting to ask the urban renewal board to do that. Okay.
That's your problem.
I am also in favor of the ADA accessibility, but I want to clarify, this is just for the playground surface, right? Not entering the park. Do we have a sidewalk that can be used? Okay. Okay, so the park or the memorial would be accessed from.
Yes.
Good.
And I spent a lot of time in parks last summer in Bend, Redmond, Madras area. And I'm not sure that this grass surface is the one that I saw this when I was there, but they were rather new parks in the Bend area. And I'm just concerned because even in there, I remember in my mind seeing how it was repaired when maybe things had happened. And the grass area did not look like the repair would last. Now that might, I'm not saying that was the exact same surface we're talking about here, but it was a kind of a rubberized grass type synthetic grass that was on some of the parks we went to. And there were parts that it looked like it had been cut out and then new pieces put in. I don't know if that would be what they would do there.
Yeah, we'd have to look more into it. We haven't looked at that in depth into will be a better cost long-term maintenance. We haven't looked at it in depth, but and we can ask, they had recommendations of cities in Oregon that have been using this for 5 or more years. So we can, you know, as a staff level, before we would put anything in, we'd research that. If we're not screen sharing.
Sleeping. To recharge, sorry. I'd only intended to have it for the presentation, so I didn't plug it in, sorry. Plug it in if you want to. There's a good balance in the park STC. There's also a good balance in just the park funds that we have as well. It's about $300,000 in each. So if it's a priority for the council and the timing feels like good, we can bring it back or make the decision, we can go forward with it. Honestly, again, you know, we can't do everything. we do need to kind of prioritize a little bit, but we're also not talking about huge sums of money either. We have funding in the street fund that we can, between street and urban renewal, if that's what the council and urban renewal wants to do, we can, make up the difference and we can take care of street lights. The water fund, we've got a huge water project we're in the middle of. Another big project that we've got to do construction, but if it's a priority, we can take care of that. We've already ordered it, right? So we know that that money's going to be there. I'm pretty optimistic on the grant. I don't want to, oversell it, but we've got some time there before we need to make any decisions. I think the park is important timeliness wise, and I think the streetlights are important timeliness wise. So those are kind of the big time sensitive pieces. That we could know if we're using ARPA funds or if we're using other funds going forward. If we're not going to do the fall surface, the grass, artificial turf grass fall surface. If we are going to use that, we just need to know like tonight so that we can let the contractor know and to start moving forward. There is funding to do it within Park SDC funds. We may have to do a resolution to amend the budget itself, depending on how much we're talking about, but we can prepare that and bring that back to you. So we can go that route. I don't want to say we just can't do anything, right? There are some funding there. We keep balances for this type of reason, right? So when there's a little bit off and we're 50,000 short or 70,000 short, it's like, well, we have a little bit of a balance there. It could go towards future projects, but we can use it on projects right now as well.
Councilor Cocker.
I'm sorry, I'm still looking for money. Has anybody, can we apply for the SLIPs grants? Because they've got money and they
Absolutely.
like to help, and I think if we're saying this is to make it ADA accessible, that's a noble cause. So, I don't know that we could get more than maybe 50,000. That would be probably the top, and maybe less, but it would be helpful.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have time to. It's gonna happen now, right? We don't have time to apply and hear back and decide whether we use ARPA funds or not for it, so. I think if we're gonna use the ARPA funds or another funding source for the Cochrane Veteran Memorial Park, that's something that we need to decide tonight so that we can, that's under construction, right? So that one we need to make a decision on. And I would say the streetlights is right behind that. We really do need to make a decision on if we're going to fund that project. Which again, we can fund both of those. It's just a matter of how much ARPA fund are we using and how much do we want to use other funding sources.
To clarify my statements about, this is a park for everyone. I appreciate about the question asking, sidewalks for people who have mobility issues to be able to enter the park. And also I know parents and grandparents like to play with their children, and not being able to do so, they wouldn't be able to do so with these, with the
Wood chips.
the wood chips, thank you. Words escape me. Which is why I feel very strongly about this, especially I think this is really important. I think that I would like to fund both projects that we've been talking about. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I think it's good. I did just ask Chris, what, off the top of his head, in 3 seconds, he came up with one quick idea of how it could be funded.
We could do really look for SDC. We've got park funds and park SDCs, and I wish I would have had my screen up another 2 minutes longer, but we've got some reserve in both of those, so we could split that the 102,000 that's needed, keep the 10 from ARPA, 52 from park SDCs, and another park fund balance that we've got there. That's give us 102,000 that were needed, so we can still proceed with that. So we're not pulling 100,000 out of park SDCs. We're also not pulling 100,000 out of just park funds, kind of split it between the two. and still get the 10,000 from the ARPA funds to kind of help without having to rob from any of the other ARPA projects.
Did you hear that? Can I follow up with the thing I remembered?
Sure.
So, because I know this is a family thing and we had questions about information between all of the different rubber surfaces. If we were able to get information by our next meeting in 2 weeks, like would that give us enough time to be able to tell the contractor?
It would. I just have a question. Do you feel that you as a council need to determine what the surface is, or do you feel like staff can research this and pick what is the best surface that's gonna be the most affordable for maintenance? I'm just questioning that because it could be a quicker solution than bringing it back and talking about it again and just kind of moving ahead. So, I think that staff is one way or another, it really is going to boil down to what is going to have the best longevity, what, you know, what do kids destroy more, things like that, and factors like that. So that's just a question for the council, if you feel like we as staff could make that determination.
I'd be fine with that.
Because I think we're all on the same page with it. I think just the comments that we've heard is pretty clear what we're looking to achieve.
Thank you for.
And when I first go to Councilor Kazi.
I'd like to call the question on Councilor McLaurin's.
Motion. I was.
Draw it.
Should I withdraw and make a new one?
Yeah.
Okay,
So do you want to withdraw your call?
after Ruth typed it all up.
She'll keep it.
Wait, okay, procedurally.
Right, she did call it.
Well, do you want to withdraw that, start over, Gordian not?
With.
Okay.
Well, if you withdrew those.
First, you.
Then I will withdraw my motion.
Okay.
I'd like to move that Cochrane Park be surfaced with a staff selected accessible surface funded with $10,000 of ARPA funds and the remainder split between park SDCs and park funds. The 13th Street lights will be funded with $80,000 of ARPA funds and the remainder from the urban renewal agency. The backup power and water supply will keep $60,000 of ARPA funds to spend on that, with the condition that if it is fully funded by an Oregon Emergency Management grant, that $60,000 will go into park funds for future use.
I was thinking about that's even longer than the last one.
And somehow, I'm sorry.
No, but it's really clear that.
It's clear.
Okay.
I do have one question. For Chris. Regarding the streetlights, in the motion, it was suggested that 80,000 come from urban renewal.
Or no, I just said the remainder.
Right. You're correct. The remainder, and I'm wondering, is there any reason we want to consider some combination of street fund and urban renewal? Or
That's already in there, isn't it?
Well, but my motion didn't include that. Just everything.
Yeah, I'm not as confident about the urban renewal fund balance as maybe Mike is. I just very concerned about the streetscape project, which is still got a whole nother year to go. And frankly, it'd be nice to have a little bit, if there were some extra money there's other urban renewal plan projects. EIE, a couple of lots that we own, that it'd be nice to have some money to put something towards as well. But again, we can't do everything, so our streetlights more important today than some future plan that we don't know about, yes. So I think the 135 out of renewal. The only disadvantage is if we know that this is the direction we're headed, just remember that, because 2 weeks from now, urban renewal agency is going to have a meeting with you all there, and you'll have to make a decision to do a plan amendment and move some money towards this plan.
So why not have some of it come from street fund or general fund, and then some of it come from urban renewal? Why not split that?
Either way, you're gonna have to have a renewal
Okay,
agency.
doesn't matter then, okay.
allocate it, so.
I guess just a clarifying question. I didn't specify in my motion that that if we don't get a grant for backup power and water supply, 60,000 would come from water fund contingency. Do I need to specify that? Because the 60,000 I specified from ARPA will cover the cost.
I don't think,
We're really big. It's
Love
really,
that.
really low.
Okay. Okay, or should we deal with that if it comes up?
Yeah, I don't think we need to make that decision. I think your motion's fine.
Okay.
And when we get down the road, if we don't get that grant, we'll
Make a new motion.
discussion anyway.
Counselor Causey.
I'm gonna nominate Counselor Nielsen's grandchildren.
All 12 of them, get them out there.
Just one other clarifying question. I moved that 60,000 of ARPA, if it's not spent on the backup power and water supply, going to park funds. Can we do that with ARPA money or do we have to?
You can do that.
Okay,
We basically washed it, I believe, when we accepted this, we said it was revenue replacement, so.
okay, great. So we don't have to designate it to a specific
Right.
function.
Still gonna have to track it.
Sure, okay.
And then I,
Yeah,
and then
It'll be the next park project.
Right, sure. Well, we don't have to decide what that is right now. Okay.
the other question on that would be,
No,
No.
my question for the council would just be, or something to think about would just be that. Do we want to specify, go to the park SDCs, or do we want it just to be a general fund so that we can use it for whatever makes sense at the time?
I like it going to the park fund, just since we're kind of draining a lot of it. It's good to them. And then it's almost like a little revenue neutral on the front.
Got it, yeah. Others? Okay. So we have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Yeah, we're gonna take a break. Okay. Take a 5-minute break and we have a lot on the agenda. Hey, we did something.
Yes. And I'm excited to tell you that my 13 hours of surgery today and everything's been called. I just
I will. So welcome back. We should have a quick conversation about the NAACP Freedom Fund sponsorship request. They literally just emailed me asking me if we would consider serving as a sponsor for the event. And I just noted that the ranges that they asked for range between $65 and up to 5,000. I made a recommendation. I have some concerns in that if we start sponsoring an event, like we might end up being asked many events. And so that's a concern of mine, something we don't have budgeted. So I know it's a small amount of money, but the additive effect of that could be. Councilor Andretti?
This is a worthwhile cause. I would love to support it. And also, I don't think now is the time. It's a very short turnaround. We already passed the deadline for when the organization.
I didn't care about that. I'm very.
Okay, well, even so, again, for like wanting equitable opportunity for others to ask for this kind of funding. They're a nonprofit. Shouldn't we invite them to apply for the social service agency funding grants? I'm also concerned about the money coming from the city council budget when we still need to schedule the city training. And the price that we pay for that training will end up being like that will depend on how many people we have going, and we want to extend that opportunity for training to as many people as possible. So I think that the training, it would be very important to us in the community.
Councilor Kazi? Your hand up.
Yes, I was actually gonna ask about the timing, but this is the NAACP. This particular chapter is primary fundraising event. And I would actually like to go ahead and support it. I might. What does it know the council budget, Chris? Dare I ask?
So you've got a line item in there. There's one item's for training that Councilor Andrade talked to, but you've got a new line item got added this year for community support opportunities. Let me look and see what that was. I got plugged in here during the break. But come back to me.
To clarify what that is, I'm under the impression that's the community building events that Councilor McMorrin had rooted for, or you're in for, like things like Pride and those kinds of events that build community.
Yeah. I don't think we ever actually like adopted a policy on that, which perhaps we could add that to a future agenda. So I mean, we can spend it on whatever we want because we never said what it was for, but that was the intent, was it was more for like, like and we got requests, for the block party and for Pride, and we never kind of knew what to do with those requests. And so I think my hope was that would be a place then where we get requests like that, we have a line item to take it out of. And since this is not an event in Philomath, it would not fall under what my intention was with that, but the council can do whatever.
Councilor Lehman.
Speaking of, where's the admin? All the information.
That's true, maybe it isn't Philomath, I don't know.
Reference where the.
I can't remember. Off the top of my head.
I think they've had it at OSU before.
And I will just, and I can just say that if we as a council decide not to, I can just make a donation myself. And buy it and do that myself, not on behalf of the city. Just a thought.
The line on a budget for community support for this fiscal year was $2,101.
Thank you. 101, but that was,
That includes some interesting.
An increase from last year's of 2,050.
I thought we didn't have it last year.
Yeah.
So I thought it was like 4,000.
Have we spent some money? Is that why, or?
I've got this starting 22-23 was 2,050. That was the revised, and the 23-24 it went to 2,101.
At the Corvallis Museum.
Okay, it didn't feel, I thought we created that.
Find that.
I'm off of what I see.
I'll figure that out.
Right, and I do feel like it's a slippery slope, but just sponsoring lots of events, and that makes me really nervous.
Do we know, like, is this something other government bodies sponsor, or is it mostly like private individuals and foundations and stuff that sponsor it? Okay, not I'm curious.
But I do see the mayor's point about sponsorship. Because we do want to have equity and discuss as a city, and that is a decent budget, but not substantial if you think about all of these sponsorships that could come in via. Yes, and that's a bit worrisome to me personally.
Do you have a motion, or should we table this? Maybe we should table it. Okay.
We'll just offer, if the council would like, I'm more than happy to reach out and. What's the date on this? I mean, if we've got time, we can, it's now?
Yeah.
I mean, we can throw something on the city's Facebook page and promote the event, we continue to do that, but again. Not necessarily done a lot of that in the past either. Pretty slow, but.
Yeah.
It's at the Corvallis Museum.
Right, thank you. So, okay, we'll just table, let's table this for now and move forward. Next, let's go ahead and go back and talk about the city manager annual evaluation timeline. Who's gonna take lead on this?
It's got your name on it.
Okay.
I think we're mostly just looking at the time frame and
Yeah.
this one's about.
So I just went to the finance committee last week and they suggested that the existing timeline that Chris go ahead and perform his performance evaluation immediately, if not already, and then pick it back to us, and that then we would then have until November 6th to complete that evaluation, and then we would review that on November 13th. So, Councilman Moore.
I was curious if there's any sort of like upward evaluation. I know, yeah, like I know a lot of evaluations are 360. This feels like it's Chris reviewing himself and us reviewing Chris, and I guess I'd be curious to know how the people Chris manages feel about Chris, because I guess I had this thought, A, because that just seems kind of like standard practice, and B, because some of these questions, like, I feel like can only kind of be answered by someone who he's managing. It's like, effectively communicates tasks to subordinates. I'm like, I don't know if he, like, I need to talk to his subordinate to know if he does that. So I guess that would be my request, is I think it looks good, but just if we could also maybe get the department heads or something too.
We come across this question every year. Wanna talk about that?
So we did one last year before.
So last year, I think we said we do it every 3 years.
So last year we had staff do one. It was voluntary because we didn't want to put them in a spot. Fairly low participation. Mostly just people that like me responded.
That's how it looked for sure.
Right,
So, I mean, I get that there's value that if you get mandatory and you're gonna track who's doing it, who's not doing it. It gets a little bit tricky. There's value there. But yeah, I mean, the decision we kind of settle on was every 3 years, we do like a more comprehensive downward looking up, but for the most part. You guys are my boss and you get to be a guy.
Okay. Go to Andrade.
So, to clarify, we made a couple word changes that we had made from previous. Times we had discussed this that hadn't been incorporated with them, and they're just. A couple of word changes like, exhibits as opposed to strives to exhibit. Fine. And then also, two things I would like to see. One is that I understand that this used to be a lot longer, and there used to be like a lot more things to fill out. I am of the mindset that each of these boxes has way too many sentences that make it difficult to evaluate the person on, because I might think that whoever I'm evaluating might be really stellar at a couple things, but then like severely lacking on another. And I feel like those scores get washed out in the unacceptable to exceptional range. And so what I would like to see, if we weren't going to be, getting rid of some of those descriptors for each of those boxes, would be to have like each sentence be its own evaluation that like each person chooses from. Because currently it takes me too long to do it. And I understand that this is very, it just depends on how each person does it. People could be very happy with the way it is now. I would like to see it changed and would like council's thoughts on that. The other thing is that when doing, I know we're not talking about the 360 now, but I would love to see the committee members, board members, commission members have the opportunity to give this as well. Ideally, I would like the public too, but I think that it's also important to hear from those who interact with the city manager on a much more regular basis. And I don't know if that's something that can be decided on now.
I'll just mention that, when I first came on council, and I don't know if any of you were with me at that time, but the evaluation was really, really long. And we gave direction to staff, let's figure out how to make it a lot shorter. And the basic gist was that we came up from this, which was a product derived from the ICMA, I believe. Yeah. And yeah, it was really, it was a lot of work to even narrow it down to this, because even the ICMA was much longer than this. So yeah, just knowing that we've gone through this process, trying to make it easier, more straightforward, I'd be really reluctant to let's go back and try to make it more complicated. So, Councilman more in action.
I hear what Councilor Andrade is saying. I think I'm comfortable with it the way it is, especially because it's like, I don't want to say it doesn't really matter, but it's all qualitative anyway. Like, yeah, we assign some scores, and at the end of the day, it's just kind of how we all feel. And so I think we have a chance in the meeting where we review it. If Councilor Andrade had a couple sections where she felt very conflicted, she could be like, oh, by the way, like, I felt like, he does these things well, but these things not as well, even though they're in the same category. It's not like we're submitting these numbers into a blind box that spits out if Chris keeps his job or not. Like this is just sort of a vibe check a little bit. I think if we wanted to do something more in depth, then we should probably do it at the same time we do the whole 360 thing. But I think since this is just sort of a check-in, I'm comfortable with it.
Councilor Crosby.
I too am very comfortable with this format. Terrible memories of earlier formats. And with that in mind, I'd like to move to approve moving forward with the city manager evaluation.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Councilor Crosby, seconded by Councilor Nielsen. Any further discussion? All in favor, please use your hand, say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Appreciate that.
To return to my earlier question. Having committee members. Picking this for us to compare. Is that something that we can discuss now, or do I need to make a motion for that?
Yep.
I move that members of city committees, boards, and commissions be given the opportunity to fill out the city manager evaluation.
We have a motion made by Councilor Andrade and seconded by Councilor Lang. You want to just speak to your motion?
I just think it's really important to hear from the people who work with him, and I think especially from a non-employee, non-supervisor kind of view, like us being supervisors, council members, and then employees from a subordinate, but like this being the community, and yeah, it's thinking about how sometimes there's this feeling of intimidation when going into a space that people are familiar with, and they're like, do you now feel welcomed? You know, having and do you now feel like you know more about how things work on the city level?
Councilor Kazi.
I respect the motion, but I will vote against it simply because having been on numerous committees and as the liaison to the planning commission, I believe those entities interact with the city manager at a much less in-depth level than this body does. And I don't believe that those committee members, other than the council members who probably interact with Chris more intensely in creating agendas and such, those committee members could really evaluate Chris's performance adequately. So I will vote against the motion.
And Jessica, are you talking about this exact same evaluation for those individuals? Are you talking about a modified evaluation for, because this talks about like with the council and some things I think it might be considered difficult for certain community members to respond to effectively for lack of information? Or were you talking about a different type of evaluation that would be specific to their interactions?
I mean, we can modify it certainly, and instead have like replace council members with like members of the body or something like that, or we can, you know,
an abbreviated one that would maybe not have.
Like getting rid of the like staff and human resources management section because they're not part of that and don't necessarily need to see, like, you don't necessarily see that. I don't know. So
I just think there's things on it that might not be relevant.
Councilor Carter.
I agree that I would like to see it stay the same. I read through it yesterday with not any problems, but there's a spot that we put our name on it. And I would encourage us to do it anonymously. We can't do that. Oh, I was talking to her.
What are you doing? I don't.
Maybe we turn it in for Ruth, she can check our name off without looking at it. and our name's not on the evaluation. That's how we used to do it. Cool.
Chris supervisor them.
But,
It'd be the same as your principal and
and that's what.
giving you your evaluation and, but doing it in non.
I'm down for, yeah, you can. Because you're essentially there to.
That would be better. I
Yeah, I don't think they will. Well, some of them are. For the benefit of the process, it is done in, it is reviewed in an executive session.
But it creates public record.
Councilor Moore?
I would prefer to table the discussion about commissions and committees and everything until we're working on that larger 360 evaluation, just because I think these are good questions about, is it the same, questions, is it different? But it feels like it'd be the same conversation we have about what staff takes and what we then, so I would, can I move to table it? Is that, I can do that? You always do. Okay. Then I would move to table this motion until table the discussion, I don't know, until we are working on 360 event.
Can I second that?
Yeah, so we have a motion to table by Councilor McMorrin, and seconded by Councilor Nielsen. All in favor of tabling the motion, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye, motion carries unanimously. Hey, with that, I want to recognize that it's 9:25. I typically go till 9:30. We're clearly not going to be there. And so I'm hoping that we can at least, I'm hoping that we can go until, at least 9:45 and then we.
Vacation of property.
Thank you. And so that's, we get consensus on that. Yeah, it should be quick. Yeah.
I have a motion. Can I do that?
Well, we're not on a topic yet,
Can you open the inclusivity committee topic?
so we're going to it right now. So go ahead.
Okay, I move that we appoint Amanda Pauley to serve through December 31st, 2023, and Rose Bricker to serve through December 31st, 2024 on the inclusivity committee.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table by Councilor McMorrin, seconded by Councilor Lehman.
I have a question.
Sure, yes.
Can't we change the date? That's 2 months. That's crazy. Can we say 2023 or 24 and 25 instead? Or is it the law?
It keeps the positions staggered, 6 positions.
Sure.
So we're trying to keep over a 3-year period, we're trying to keep them staggered at 2, 2, and 2.
We should reappoint.
And this will be reappointed in January. Councilor Andrade.
I just also wanted to let people know that at our last inclusivity committee meeting, we had one committee member resign. So now we currently have 3 people who are volunteer citizen committee members, official committee members. And I don't know if that changes what the stagger terms are. Okay, I don't have my I forgot to check, but anyway.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye. Motion carries. Great, thank you. And resolution 23, 24. Christie wants to speak to resolution 2024 concurring with Benton County order vacating North 20th Street Bridal.
Yeah, this is Benton County right away with 20th Street. That's up against the Lutton RV park essentially. So are you planning with Benton County to vacate that right of way? And in order to vacate the right of way, Benton County needs concurrence from the city of Philomath because it's inside of our city limits. So they're looking for a passive resolution, and then that will complete their planning land use approval process, and they
So the county vacates it, does it then become the property of the city or?
Property owners, similar to our process.
Councilor Jai?
I just want to make sure that I understood this correctly, because there's a lot of papers and maps and stuff. So they're asking for a vacation to make that the entrance and exit to the property, like to build the road to connect.
No, their entrances will come off of 19th Street. This is more just a dead end stub that comes up into their property that they'd rather utilize for. I think the RV office areas down there or something's down in that area instead. I have the map right in front of me, but it's just a extension of the street that. They don't really do very long.
It doesn't it make, it moves the entry off of 19th Street away from the railroad tracks? Farther.
Does it?
It did say something, because I got confused, because at one point it said something about having a building closer to something, and then at another point it said something about changing, the entrance.
It allows their entrance to come further south. They've got to be so far away from that front right away there.
My question is, is there any chance that we ever are gonna want to extend 20th Place? To connect?
No, not there. It would never connect there with that S curve, the way that figure in the county never still for that.
The weird.
Councilman.
Yeah, just notice on the report from the county engineer, it says future use, there is no future use of this right away for a road. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to do this.
You want to make,
I would love to make a motion. I move that the city council pass resolution 2324 to concur with Benton County's order vacating the northerly portion of North 20th Place.
we have motion made by Councilor Lehman, seconded by Councilor McMorrin. Is that right, or you?
Yeah, I am.
That's fine.
I guess just, and I apologize if it covered this somewhere in here, but the other part of that future use of the westerly 48 feet should be reserved for existing and future utility easements to the city. Does this include that? Okay.
It's included in the resolution. Yeah, it's just utility.
Sorry if we need to. Yeah.
Right.
In exhibit B, on page 4 of that, it says, there is no public storm drain in section C, public storm drainage, there's no public storm drainage within the existing right of way to be vacated. And then they said that there's drainage system in North 19th Street right of way that will provide drainage in the vicinity. And that therefore the applicant's belief is that no easement division is necessary for that. Do you know if Public Works agrees with that statement, or whether we think that they do drainage there?
I can't tell you for sure, Councilor. On page 3.
Page 4 on exhibit B. So it's.
If there is a utility easement retained for public and private utilities, then if there was some future need for a storm drain through there, that's a public utility.
That counts, even though there's a separate section for it. Okay, thank you.
One question on page 3 of 4. Item 6 refers to a sidewalk and pedestrian bikeway will be provided adjacent to North 29th Avenue. Where is that? Where is that in?
It'd be North 19th.
North 19th is a street, not an avenue. the dues, it's known as such.
Isn't that North 20th? Place, like, because if I remember correctly, the bike path is gonna be going parallel to 20th.
Yeah, if you look at the very last, it shows the future walkway intended to go along there, and it actually splits. One goes adjacent to 19th Street, but the other kind of forks and goes down further, down towards the kind of the other side of where the office area is going to be, and will connect into the rest of that industrial development across the creek. So kind of splits. And I'm not sure why the reference to 29th Avenue is there. It's just be 19th Street.
Thank you.
Any further questions, discussion? That was Councilor McMorrin.
Oh, yeah. That's the question.
Oh, I did both
Simultaneously with one hand.
I know. Yeah, we're getting crazy tonight.
All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye. That motion carried unanimously. A late showing by Councilor Nielsen.
I still think something's going on 20th sidewalk wise. Can I just tell you? I'm looking at this one. Okay.
The vacation doesn't really approve any plan.
Right. No.
Okay, so let's go back. Now we're going to jump back to 23-21. Establishing deferred compensation retirement savings plans with Nickens Pills. Is that Chelsea?
Okay, so Fritz and I were talking about this, I think a little over a year ago. Mike is not here, but we also have the same sentiments. Mostly Mike and I have had a lot of issues with our current provider. This is nationwide. They, on my side, they are not very reachable or approachable for employees who can get assistance with. They're non-existent. Employees have said they haven't been out here for years to talk to anyone or give anyone any resources. From Mike's side, as far as being he does the plan behind the scenes. He also has had a lot of issues. We're just not happy with Nationwide, that we don't feel like that it's providing a good service to employees. Mission Square was formerly called ICMA Retirement, I think very recently changed their name. And is very public employee centric. City of Corvallis and county both use Mission Square. I think Benton County uses several because of union contracts that they had in the past. So what we're proposing is to switch from Nationwide to Mission Square. They do provide a service for retirees, so anyone who is retired and has an account, they will reach out to them and give them options. They can stay with Nationwide, they can switch over. For current employees, in order for us to get the best savings on fees for employees, we would switch everyone to Nationwide, but they also help with transitioning folks into Nationwide or from Nationwide into Mission Square. And so, yeah, if anyone has questions about this.
Councilor Pazzi?
You mentioned that they have local representation.
Yeah, so she is in the general local area. She kind of has a big area that I talked to her at ICMA Oregon conference. She's been very responsive. Corvallis also meets with her quite a bit, so she does come to this area quite a bit, and they are willing, they're not concerned that we're small, they're willing to come here if we want to have them for open enrollment, or if we just want to touch bases with them. And they also have really good services for calling and setting up meetings with financial advisors or just our representative. They have both.
And did speak with other groups that use them.
I did speak with City of Corvallis. I didn't get a lot of information other than that they are using them. They're happy with them. That's I didn't get a whole lot of information from them quite frankly, but.
Make a motion to approve resolution 23-21, establishing deferred compensation and retirement plan. Savings plan to Mission Square retirement.
Second.
Make me myself, second by Counselor Causey. Any questions, comments? All in favor, please use your hand, say aye. Aye, motion carries. And then the next thing on the agenda is resolution 23-22, repealing management longevity policy number 10-05. Chelsea?
Yeah, this one's pretty simple. When we redid when we basically rewrote the entire employee handbook to update it from 20 years past. There was the management longevity pay policy, which Chris and I both mentioned while we were going through that process. It is at this point obsolete, so we just want to make sure that we're following procedure and have it documented that the current policy that we've put in place, which includes all city employees being eligible, is now in effect, and that this policy is.
And what?
To approve resolution 23-22, repealing management longevity pay policy 10-05.
We have a motion made by Councilman Moore and seconded by Councilman Andrade. Any further discussion? All in favor, please use your hand, say aye. Do you want to speak to the management report?
Are there any questions? Just provide a little bit more detail than usual, but what was going on. I did attend, what's on there, did attend ICMA conference in Austin last week. It was terrific. I want to thank my staff for holding down the fort while I was gone and not having me have to worry about a whole lot or talk about the memo that got prepared and nothing for a lot of time. I was gone. So big thanks to them. Great conference. And a couple one session specific on public art programs. We're gonna have all these plinths out here, and so it's nice to be able to talk through that with some folks and best practices, failings, and that bit. So anyway, a lot of good information that'll pay dividends down the road as we're taking on different things. But yeah, and enjoyed my time away. Came back recharged, ready to go. And yeah, other than that, I can answer any questions.
Mentioned that 4 days ago, 5 days ago, that Maxtivity reached out with a grant application asking if we had any places that we could put public art if they were to apply for a grant. And I was like, there's gonna be plinths.
Yes.
But I think we missed the deadline on that. Maybe let's talk about that in the future.
Well, one of the very first best practices is figure out how we're gonna maintain and replace, and if you don't have that, then you're doomed to fail. So that'll be one of the conversations is what's the funding for this to
Art.
About the Visual Artists' Rights Act.
That too.
allows
I have
stuff
your-
to stay forever.
I have your template now.
I didn't.
Mike left, so I don't know. We mentioned urban renewal funds are to be spent on the streets. Does anyone know we can also spend that on? If it's near a street. And maybe that's a
Well,
question for later.
it's
If you have a policy that you need to spend a certain percentage, and there's some federal money and state money that requires you to spend a percentage of that funding. Just why you see,
Right.
decorative bridges, underpasses and things.
And there are grants too.
Right, I guess I'm just wondering like if. I mean, I guess.
our current urban renewal plan does not call for
Okay.
any urban renewal funds to go towards public art.
But,
So it would be an amendment. to-
okay, but we can, that's not like some state law or something that we have to, like that, we can change that.
It's in your plan and you find the funding source. So
Okay. Thank you.
Can I remind everybody to speak up, please?
Yeah. Any council reports? Or you have a question?
Four quick things. It says that you're looking for a Highway 34 Scenic Byway Management Committee person. I don't have any liaisonships. I'd be happy to do it, especially since they're only meeting quarterly.
Sweet. Can I get a consensus from the councils or?
Yeah. Another. If there's been any updates that you've heard of? I would like to hear those. And then a question about DEI pending scheduling date. And then I also wanted to know if you wanted to update the council on some of the accessibility stuff that you talked about with the Inclusivity Committee.
So what I was so excited about writing this about, didn't finally.
No pun.
Mill Pond, it's been another concerted effort to reach out to property owners on the lot line adjustments. There's some frustration that some residents have moved forward with their process and contacted their mortgage companies, others have not. For properties specifically haven't reached out, according to what we heard from Mill Pond Crossing. I reached out to those 4 individually. We heard back from one already, three already, and Mayor got further down on his email than I did. So we've heard back from 3 of those 4, and so we'll sort through those. There's just a lot of stars that has to line just right at about the same time in order to move that process forward. So there's a concerted effort there on the lot line adjustments, which I'm happy to see that they're on. Mill Pond is more engaged in now than what they've been in the past, which is good. The entire storm detention area in phase 1, between phase 1 and phase 2, it's really phase 2 has been graded. It's ready for concrete, so they're just going to wait for the right window. And the other buildings on the east side of 16th Street are moving forward. They've got permits. They're at grade where they're supposed to be, as far as we can tell, based on what we're looking at. So they're pretty positive. And then the methane continues to go forward. They've got one specific project that they're looking at that's been postponed a couple of times. I think scheduling, and one was weather related and others, but they're continuing to do their monitoring, notify. There's again, the one big project that I know they're anxious to get done up in the north on the 16th. So they had some equipment breakdown and all the sifting, sorting that you saw. That was kind of cool to watch, where they're sorting out all the organic material from the dirt. They had some equipment malfunctions. They're working on getting parts and getting that up and operational again. So they're hoping to get through more of that before the weather really turned on. But see. DEI playing phone tag with the university, which I feel like I've been saying for a month. It's been a month and was out for a little bit, so they're on my list to get a hold of. I'm going to be at LOC with some of you on Thursday, Friday. So goals to try to reach out again tomorrow and Wednesday and try to lock down a date. Just trying to find a couple dates that would work for them that I can present to you. And we're looking like first part of January at this point. I'm not planning to do anything holidays, so January, February should be far enough out that we should be able to find dates that work for everybody. So that's the goal there. Is that the 4th?
Yeah.
Accessibility. Yeah, that's really stuff. Today we had municipal court for the 2nd time. We had a virtual appearance before the judge, which is great. Judge Blake is all on board. The equipment seems to be working fine. So that's a nice alternative that more than anything that Brianna, our court clerk, can give as an option for people to appear, right? And so, people come across and they're upset. They have to come in. It's like, no, you can call, you can hop on a Zoom call. It's like, oh, okay. And so that's a good thing. It kind of disarms people when they've got more options to be able to appear in court. We're meeting tomorrow with a consulting firm, contractor, design build that's looking at doing some remodeling for us in the front to get better ADA accessibility to the front of the building. I'm also looking to kind of redo the lobby and rework our work area a little bit there to make it a little better accessible and just more functional for staff. But that's all kind of tied in there. But I think the other top of mind things, which else did I report at the meeting?
The Monday night switch.
Gonna stay open a few Monday nights late. I was kind of waiting for my schedule to jam up a little bit, and I'm going to announce that in the newsletter and get that out there. So I'm not sitting around for no reason, but we're going to try as kind of a pilot for a few months. Stay after Monday nights. See if that helps people be able to get here to make payments and do what they need to do. So may start that as early as November. Get the word out, the newsletter and stuff.
you probably already all heard, but I want to recognize that Ruth Post was awarded City Recorder of the Year.
I have to say, whenever I talk to other city people, if they know one thing about Paloma, it's Ruth. And it's a good things, but it seems to be a trend, so.
We're really proud of her, for sure. Yes. So, anything else from council?
I'll just throw out one more thing. The Inclusivity Committee is trying to find ways to include and show that we want to honor the various communities that we are doing our proclamations for. And this is just still in the precursor that we have not voted on it. It's just, but for a pilot, we've made this banner. That the concept is that we would have a banner for each of our months with the proclamation and hang them one on Main Street and update. Because yes, people can access who we are honoring online, but they would have to go to that much effort to do that. Whereas they're driving right by these places on a regular basis, so they would be able to see that we have made a stand and say, well, these people are important and we're honoring them along with the national.
Councilor Moore.
Just one quick report, which there will probably be more information on later, but the fire district is considering a levy in 2026. Because their current bond measure will expire, and so they're considering just replacing the bond with their operating levy. So just a heads up, as we're thinking about things, I don't think we have any plans for bonds or levies or anything, but I think the fire district is kind of staking their claim for 2026. So they haven't officially decided to do that yet, but they're talking. So it would not be an increase in taxes. It's just keeping the same rate, but instead of going to infrastructure and equipment. Personal.
Councilor Andrade.
A quick follow-up question for Chris about the mill pond clamping and the equipment for sifting sediment. Are there not, I guess, are there not environmental concerns because that sediment is theoretically still polluted, right? Like if you're taking the organic material out, but still reusing it for fill, has like the EPA like approved all of this, or, and it might be a question you have to return to at another time or over email, but.
No, it's a good question. What I know of that process is it's all being overseen by DEQ and being mandated and carefully monitored by DEQ. And paid for by a large loan that came from Business Oregon. So there, which has got oversight to it as well. So yeah, I mean, more generally, the whole intent of everything through those isn't because it's polluted, it's because it's got organic material, which is like wood fiber, wood debris, bark chips. You can see the piles of the material there. It's not pollution per se, it's wood waste, wood byproduct that's mixed in with the dirt, and so they're separating that out so that when they spread the dirt, they're not creating more methane producing material out in fields and everywhere else. So where all that wood waste is going to go is probably to a landfill somewhere where it's going to gas off, where everything else is gassing off, and it will be a problem, but it's not going to go in farmers fields and development areas and stuff. So, but I don't know, I would call it polluted soil. It's fill material.
Yeah, I guess I just thought there had been some pollution from like, you know, the machinery and stuff, the oils that come off of it, and
Some of that was identified further like southeast corner, but not necessarily where the piles are and stuff now. So they're gonna get into that more when they get to like phase 3 and phase 4. They will have some contaminated soil that they're gonna have to mitigate. They have to pull it out and treat it separately, but that's different than what they're doing there. Right now, they're just sorting out the organic wood material.
thank you.
With that, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn.
Oh, I have one more thing.
Deferred.
Sorry. Paloma Community Services has a new executive director, Sharon Thornberry. I don't know if you've met her. That was discussed last month or whatever, but she's doing a bang up job and very concerned with the safety of it.
So that we are gonna actually move into a executive session.
We will not be coming back to open session because there won't be anything.
Okay. We're in a regular session and then move into executive session. So with that, open session is adjourned.
This will be a fairly brief update.
Per ORS 192.6602H to consult legal counsel regarding current litigation.